Greetings, citizens of the world.
It's like a horror movie scenario.
Hail Moloch.
Iron bowl with two owls on each side of it in front of the giant owl statue.
I am the beast that is knowledge.
Is trying to build a body for himself. Like, he's not completely incarnate, but he is.
Newsletter.
I'm Mark Bruno, presenting you with the official newsletter of the Moloch blog, where I track the latest technology happenings in cyber warfare and crime, open source intelligence, the surveillance state, and modern conflict. And this audio newsletter should be going out about a month before the website hits its second birthday. While the project was never originally conceived to be that consistent, my love for the work, as well as my background in the field, have only grown. The desire to make this a viable career is pretty settled for me at this point. My goal is to take the blog and the podcast to the next level this year. Again, I feel like this is something that I say along those lines like every 6 months, but there really is a compromise between my day job, education, and creating for this outlet that gets closer to becoming in sight. By the time next month's newsletter drops, there'll be a roadmap that I'm comfortable sharing with everyone. As it says up top, if you're reading this, I wanted to thank you all for all your support and the energy you've spent providing me with feedback, reading my articles, and genuinely just making it feel like I'm not writing into the void. Before we get started, I linked to this organization in the last article, but please consider donating to the World Central Kitchen. They're one of a handful of organizations left still trying to work in Gaza. They take donations in a number of formats, including PayPal tips and crypto. And just in case you're wondering, yes, the World Central Kitchen has resumed operations in Gaza following the April 1st killing of their employees by the IDF. And just a recap of what I've come out with so far this month. On the podcast side of things, the current series, El Salvador's Chivo Wallet, is ongoing. My hope is that the whole story should be wrapped up by the 4th episode, but there's a lot to get into on that, and it's just not the place in this newsletter. Episode 2 should have dropped shortly before this newsletter, and after a long wait, which I will not be replicating. Episode 3 is being cut as I write this. As far as articles that were written this month before putting this out, again, this should have been published mid-month. We've got 2 here. The first one I wrote about as it was happening, the promised 7 days of siege by SiegeSec and how it started with supply chain attacks against Israel. From June 3rd to June 10th, the mixed bag threat actor SiegeSec claims to have begun releasing new data from breaches related to their hacktivism against organizations accused of aiding Israel. After I published the article, the group also alleged an attack on NATO, which is an old favorite of theirs. The group's final target drew attention from the mainstream media as they allegedly breached the Heritage Foundation as news of the horrible Project 2025 hit the mainstream. After this breach, the group called it quits in a statement over Telegram, and founder Vio participated in a Reddit AMA in the meantime. However, a long tweet by VX Underground attempted to shed some light on the group's claims, make it seem like maybe it wasn't quite as impressive as it looked from VX Underground. On July 9th, 2024, SiegeSec, a self-described hacktivist group, claimed to have compromised the Heritage Foundation. The breach has been filled with American political banter. Here's our non-biased high-level overview. It's a long read. No, I won't read the whole thing. According to VX Underground, the breach of the Heritage Foundation was not a network and/or enterprise compromise. SiegeSec compromised their WordPress domain. This is significantly different than an internal network compromise. The data exfiltrated is data which is present on their website. Just going into the specifics on the data, from a high-level overview, the data appears legitimate. However, the scope is limited to what was from their WordPress site. It is primarily documents which are marked as private. The data also unveils some users' PII. Some emails present end with the .mil, .ru, and .cn top-level domains. Some individuals who reviewed the data believe this to be suspicious and question the presence of these email addresses. While these top-level domains are indeed present, there's not necessarily any indication of external state-sponsored influence. So that's VX Underground trying to, take away any steam from any rumors that might be what's happening here. Mike Howell, the executive director of the Heritage Oversight Project, spoke with individuals from SiegeSec following the breach. Mike Howell asked SiegeSec about their preferred communication platform, their motives. During the conversation, Mike Howell informed SiegeSec that they will seek legal action against their group. Subsequently, he called them closeted furries and said that they'll be exposed to the world for being degenerate perverts. I was going to put it out there, not going to read the whole thing, but Mike Howell just kind of seems like a giant piece of shit. I know CSEC, they're not my favorite people in the world, but the part that I cut out, you guys can follow the link if you want. It was a really fucked up thing to say. Moving on from the CSEC story. Very early in the month, Ukrainian cyber resistance hackers leaked months of Dmitry Medvedev's email communication to inform Napalm. On June 27th, Ukrainian hackers from the cyber resistance team have leaked a trove of internal communications belonging to former Russian president and current chairman of Russia's Security Council, Dmitry Medvedev. Communications largely revolve around Medvedev's talking points at various public appearances, but also discusses many details of Russia's ongoing ambitions in the Arctic. So what else is in the news? What have I been reading from outside of, my own work? So in a story that I read on Wired by Del Cameron, U.S. senators secretly work to block safeguards against surveillance abuse. Efforts by the U.S. Senate to introduce new safeguards against misuse of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, FISA, have stalled due to objections from at least 2 Republican senators. The Senate Intelligence Committee had approved provisions to limit the scope of wiretap orders and ensure civil liberties advisors are consulted more reliably in FISA cases. However, objections have been raised over concerns that these changes could slow down intelligence operations and grant excessive rights to foreign nationals. The dispute threatens to derail reforms intended to protect Americans' privacy and could impact the future trust in intelligence oversight. Yeah, you say that again. This next one I read on ProPublica, written by Craig Silverman. The president ordered a board to probe a massive Russian cyber attack. It never did. This one's in reference to the SolarWinds hack. ProPublica is not necessarily a tech publication, so you forgive them for keeping it out of the headline. By not investigating the Microsoft software weakness critical to the SolarWinds hack, the Cyber Safety Review Board missed an opportunity to prevent future attacks, according to experts. Despite an executive order to review the SolarWinds incident, the board, housed within the Department of Homeland Security, never conducted a public investigation into Microsoft's role. Critics argue this oversight left U.S. systems vulnerable, as evidenced by a subsequent Chinese hack exploiting Microsoft flaws. The board's limited independence and lack of subpoena power have hindered its effectiveness, raising calls for it to be restructured as an independent agency with full investigative authority. Yeah, and it's a really long article. It's not an encouraging read, put it that way, but it is a great piece by Craig Silverman there. Next isn't necessarily a piece, but it's just an update on APT 40, because CISA released an advisory that was supported by a number of other intelligence agencies from like 6 different countries. I'm just going to hit you with briefly with a summary of the explanation CISA gives for APT 40. Also known as Kryptonite Panda, Gingham Typhoon, and Bronze Mohawk. They're a Chinese state-sponsored cyber espionage group linked to the Ministry of State Security. Active since at least 2009, APT-40 primarily targets entities in sectors such as biomedical research, robotics, and maritime industries, as well as organizations aligned with China's Belt and Road Initiative. The group exploits newly public vulnerabilities in widely used software, preferring to compromise public-facing infrastructure to gain initial access, per the recent warning by CISA. Key tactics include phishing campaigns, credential theft, and the use of web shells for persistent access. Notably, APT-40 leverages compromised small office and home office, SOHO, devices for command and control infrastructure, making detection and attribution challenging. The advisory stresses the importance of patch management, multi-factor authentication, and network segmentation to mitigate the threat posed by APT-40, and I want to stress that they largely mention that they pose the biggest threat to Australian networks, although this doesn't mean anywhere is particularly safe from them. Now for something a little happier, Avast releases a free decryptor for Dunex ransomware and its past variants. Read it on Bleeping Computer by Bill Toulis. Avast has discovered a vulnerability in the cryptographic scheme of the Dunex ransomware family and released a decryptor, allowing victims to recover their files for free. It's always good news. Dunex, a rebrand of the Dark Race and Muse ransomware, which I actually know a little better than Dunex, so that's weird, encrypts files using the ChaCha20 symmetric key, which is then encrypted with RSA 4096. Avast identified a flaw in this process, affecting all Dunex variants, including a fake Lockbit 3.0 branded variant from November 2022. This vulnerability, which may involve issues like key reuse or predictable generation, allows decryption without paying a ransom. The decryptor tool, available from Avast, requires a pair of encrypted and original files, and works best with large example files to maximize the size of files that can be decrypted. Users are advised to back up their encrypted files before using the tool to prevent potential corruption. And if you're curious, I've got some other important stories. There's no real judgment on like which of these is more important than others. It's just kind of the order that I got to them in. So first, a briefing by Amnesty International about how global tech systems are fueling gender inequalities. Then on 404 Media, we got a U.S. nuke agency buys internet backbone data. Give that one a read. Pretty creepy. Then an article by Kevin Townsend of Security Week. We've got a Supreme Court ruling threatening the framework of cybersecurity regulation. This one specifically talks about how basically the reversal of the Chevron doctrine is going to have a major effect on how cyber regulations are enforced in the US. Then this one is an evolution of the big AT&T leak story that you might have heard of. So AT&T paid a hacker $370,000 to delete stolen phone records. That one you could find on Wired by Kim Zetter. Then Terra Seals and Dark Reading put out a story, well-established cybercriminal ecosystem blooming in Iraq. Then if you want another reason to hate Meta, you got Facebook ads for Windows desktop themes pushing info-stealing malware. Read on Bleeping Computer by Lawrence Abrams. Then a favorite read of mine, crypto researcher and software engineer Molly White launched her new Follow the Crypto project. That one's basically about how the crypto industry is getting very involved in US politics. Molly White's website is awesome. It's full of handy graphs and charts that show you just how much certain campaigns have gotten from which crypto packs. Then on the story that I have very mixed feelings about, Kaspersky Lab closing its U.S. division and laying off workers, quite a few. That one was published on Zero Day, also by Kim Zetter, just a different publication. And 9.4 gigs of Twitter data was leaked. Over 200 million records exposed online. You can read that on Cyberpress by Balaji. I'll take this down to the housekeeping section. It's going to talk about how I got some new toys here. Newsletter is going to essentially be taking over the news and housekeeping sections of the earliest episodes of the Virtual Verity podcast. What I'm hoping is that this will give the podcast a 1, more fluid production schedule, and 2, the ability to feel relevant even as more time has gone on. It's kind of weird when somebody goes back, listens to like the latest news and, it's something from months earlier. This is something that I've noticed with the mini episodes that were based on some of my feature articles. They draw a lot more attention and people seem to enjoy not having to skip through a rundown of news that they might have already been aware of at the time or is completely timed out of relevance. The newsletter itself that you are reading or listening to is managed by Steady. We'll also be managing my monetization scheme when that finally rolls out. Think of them as a less awful German Patreon that actually understands GDPR. That said, please let me know if you're having any sort of performance or mechanical issues with the newsletter. The email I'll probably read the most would be the Moloch at protonmail.com. And yeah, if you've been following the website for a while, I just gave it a big facelift. It should look a lot more unhinged, but I still want it to be usable. The old theme was just getting a little too clunky. I never really thought it looked good. And I figured there's going to be a sort of new soft launch of the blog and podcast coming up. It was the time to make the change. Feel free to reach out, but also don't feel compelled to pay for anything yet. At the moment, please don't put any thought into paying me for this work until I know I can. Okay, let me date that. As of the middle of July 2024, please do not put any thought into paying me for this work until I know I can provide something that's up to the standards and consistency that you deserve. It just wouldn't feel right any other way. And I still maintain that I do not want to get involved with the bold new Twitter. As a matter of fact, if you see me posting on anything other than Blue Sky or Mastodon, it's a new tool that I use called Only Social, which manages my resharing and baseline promotion. You'll also not be able to reach me in a timely manner if you don't try to get me on, again, Blue Sky or Mastodon, or you can get me on that email, again, the Moloch at protonmail.com. I'm trying to get better about Telegram, but it's touchy. I'm also not quite sure how to promote the Telegram channel yet. I'll leave a link in the email, but yeah. And yeah, I just appreciate any feedback you have and, the time that you put into reading this thing. So until next month or the next podcast episode or the next article, be safe. Hey, thanks for listening. If you want to check out more of the work I'm doing with this project, you can go to virtualveritypod.com or themoloch.com. This should take you to the same place. Find me on Twitter and Blue Sky at Mark J. Bruno and It's Bruno, respectively. The Moloch blog should also be on Mastodon on the InfoSec Exchange. You can shoot me an email at contact@themoloch.com. All writing, editing, planning, and production is done by myself, Mark Bruno. Artwork was provided by CM Kosemen. All music is provided by Chris Delano.
Greetings, citizens of the world.
This is virtual verity.
We are anonymous.
It has cameras and sensors.
It is a podcast.
But it turns out someone else may have been watching too.
And just like your phones and social media apps.
And although it was a piece of malicious ransomware on the surface, the attack wasn't really about money.
We are Legion. We do not forgive.
We do not forget.